Awesome. Kriss and Paul, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Mo.
Awesome. Maybe we can start with some quick introductions. Who wants to go first?
Happy to go first?
Yeah, go for it, Paul. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, hey everyone.
Yeah.
I'm Paul. I'm the head of Fincrime Operations here at Griffin Bank.
Awesome. Kriss?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Chris Collison. I'm the money laundering reporting officer for Griffin Bank. I've been with the bank for, it'll be 3 years this week, in fact. I started off as a deputy, and then they moved me to the MLRO after a couple of years.
Awesome. Awesome. Why don't we kick off by explaining what does an MLRO, a money laundering reporting officer, and what does a head of Fincrime Ops, what do these roles do at a bank? I think for a lot of people listening, like they might not be super familiar with like the intricate details of like how a bank runs and how like kind of financial crime prevention works. So maybe Kriss, do you want to start by giving an introduction on like what is your role? Like what are you thinking about? What do you do on a day-to-day basis? That type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give a bit of context, a bit of background, actually. So that might help with understanding the different roles and how they kind of complement each other at a bank. So we operate in a traditional three lines of defence model. So basically what that means is you have the first line of defence, and they're the guys who undertake the operation of our controls. They're on the front line, which is Paul's role. You then have the second line of defence in a freelance defence model, and that's where I come in. So what I do is I oversee, I make sure that the business is operating the controls effectively and in line with regulation and legislation and kind of your regulator's expectation. And then you have the third line, which is your audit department, and they oversee everything, and they kind of give you an independent view of everything the bank is operating first or second line. So as I say, I'm the MLRO, so I work within the second line. So I have the ultimate responsibility for our bank's adherence to the regulatory framework set out and the legislation set out. So basically, if it goes wrong and I don't do my job properly, I go to prison. Which is
not a joke, is it? That's not a joke.
No. It's unfortunately extremely true, which is why Paul is my best friend and enemy at the same time. But no, so, day to day, my role is to, like I said, ensure that the business is adhering to our regulatory expectations. They're meeting regulation, they're meeting legislation. We do that via assurance review. So going in and testing our control framework, making sure everything is working and as expected and designed as expected. We're in charge of policy, so we set the policy of the business. How do we actually operate to ensure we're within the regulatory guidelines? And that's kind of how we go about it. Another big part of the role is what we call horizon scanning. So seeing what's coming down the line, changes to legislation, changes to regulation, new risks emerging, all that kind of good stuff, right? Assessing that, interpreting for the business, and putting together plans for the first line to implement any additional controls or changes to controls that are required. So that's kind of like a day-to-day. It's not really a BAU kind of role. It's more of a longer-term thinking, strategic kind of role where we're constantly sticking our noses in places where maybe people don't want us there all the time. But we do it for the business. And we kind of, the way I see myself is I'm like a safety blanket for the business.
Right. Okay.
They're doing the right thing because I'm sitting there telling them they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Huge responsibility. Wow. Paul, what does your day-to-day look like? Yeah.
I try and keep him out of as much trouble as possible, really. I've got a great, competent Fincrime team here. So I split it into two main areas, really. The BAU that Kriss just spoke about, BAU operations. So what does that look like? That's the onboarding of our customers. So we have those unaware of the banking as a service model. We have our direct customers, and their customers are what we call our nested customers. Undertaking a review of a direct customer is a real highly skilled process. conducting a customer risk assessment. So that's point one of the onboarding. Point two being our nested customers. So that's a higher volume, but there are manual touch points as you'd expect on occasion. So we will look at the reviewing of the nested customers as well for ensuring that they're within risk appetite for ourselves. Then we have more of the ongoing monitoring aspect of it, really. So that's transaction monitoring, working with other payment service providers, PSPs, periodic reviews, and ongoing screening of our customers. We also have ongoing assurance. So do our customers continue to meet the standards that we set, or Kriss sets at onboarding, and we undertake it? And then the quality assurance, as Kriss alluded to, how are our controls continually performing? So that's the operations or BAU operations. Then we have the strategic operations arm, really. So that's working closely with the likes of yourself, Mo, on the connect side, and sales and all that good stuff. We have a fantastic relationship with our product and engineering teams. And yeah, there's always areas that we want to improve the customer life cycle, the customer experience, and to coin a phrase of a previous manager of mine, the art of the possible. We're building new things, right? We're building new models. We're going into different markets. How do we get there, and what do we need to achieve it? And that's when we bring in the likes of Kriss from a oversight and assurance perspective, really.
Yeah. Wow. Very broad. Goodness me. Broad spectrum of responsibilities, a lot of depth. I don't envy you.
Thanks.
I'll stick to my podcast recordings and having a chat every week. No, super, super cool. Very, very lucky, I think, for people listening. I also get to work with Kriss and Paul quite closely at times, and very lucky at how kind of pragmatic and experienced you both are. And on that kind of point of experience, financial crime. So, I mean, maybe for a bit more context, like I had never kind of interacted with, I'd never worked in a bank or in the financial space before. And I didn't realize how almost crazy financial crime is. And therefore the prevention of it is like I don't know. I mean, you can kind of describe, but how has the landscape changed from like the prevention of financial crime over the course of kind of your careers?
Yeah, I'm happy to start this from a first line. Back in the day when I was a fraud analyst on the acquiring side, only a few years ago, you would have a lot of account takeover, people trying to get access to accounts. And now we've seen a seismic shift to what I would call exploiting the soft underbelly, so to speak. So that's the human element. So social engineering has been prevalent for a number of years. So we've seen that continuous movement. We've now got authorized push payments, for example. Then we've got money mules, which unfortunately exploit often the most vulnerable in society. So that's where I've seen that particular change over, I'll be honest, over the last couple of decades.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, I think Paul's right. I think that at the end of the day, fraudsters look for the easiest point of entry, right? And unfortunately, people are the weakest link in the chain, so to speak. That's definitely what you'll see. The tactics moving away from exploiting weaknesses in the bank's control framework and online banking. I don't want to give away how old I am, but online banking was pretty newfangled concept when I first started out, all the banking apps and stuff. So it was very much being exploited, as Paul says, from an account takeover perspective. But as the banks and financial institutions have kind of learned over time and improved their control framework, and new technologies come out to prevent them, it's kind of an arms race, if you will, between banks and the fraudsters and the money launderers. they've had to kind of exploit a different route. And as Paul says, that's the people, that's the social engineering. It's that kind of thing. And kind of just to, again, talk about technology and stuff like that. So when I started out on the telephones, ringing people up, asking whether they recognise a transaction on their account, that's how long ago it was. We had a fax machine with a filing cabinet next to it, and we'd get faxes from other financial institutions and law enforcement, and we'd have to file it in the right cupboard in right drawer in the filing cabinet. So yeah, that technology is the point I'm trying to make, has moved on so much in relation, not just to the efficiencies in processes, but actually in identifying and detecting suspicious activity on accounts, stopping obviously individuals from accessing genuine people's accounts. But like Paul says, that obviously opens up the other route for these fraudsters, which is the individuals themselves, the consumers themselves.
It's so interesting how you describe it as an arms race as well. And also it's so interesting about the point on social engineering. It seems like whether it's financial crime or kind of hacking, social engineering seems to be at the kind of root of a lot of this stuff. I guess, as humans, we are susceptible to certain things. So, oh goodness me, it makes sense. What do you think companies should be watching out for today? Like, are there specific things that you would say, like we concentrate on, or that you kind of say should be top of mind?
Yeah, I guess if you're looking at it from a retail perspective, maybe, or consumer perspective, fictitious goods and services still remains prevalent. As we're coming up to the busy Christmas period now, where deals are to be had, and sometimes too good to be true deals, for example, that crop up and again exploit the most vulnerable in society yet again. So
sorry to jump in, not to embarrass my dad, but he just got he had one of these. He came for his email. It looked incredibly convincing. He made an order. It didn't show up. He showed it to me, and I was like, that email doesn't match what they said. Luckily, a few weeks later, he got reimbursed. But it's so common. Sorry to interrupt. But
it is. No, you're right. We're still seeing it, and we've seen it. Kriss and I have seen it for years and years, and it continues, but it just moves in a different form. Facebook Marketplace, for example, is another area for that type of thing to take off. Used to just be like fake websites and what have you. Whilst they're still they're still around. There's other means for that to occur. Invoice redirection is still another one. Targeting, executives of a company, applying that kind of pressured boiler room tactics of, this payment needs to be made quickly. Sunday morning, for example, maybe targeting junior members of staff. It's not hard to find out who works where in LinkedIn and these type of platforms. So we've seen that. And as I said, the fake sites, they are still around, trying to hook people in.
Yeah, I think one of the things we should be looking out for is obviously making sure people got the right education and training. And that includes those who work in the industry and those in general life as well, don't work in industry. Education is massively important. The tactics that these guys are using are those to create urgency or panic, right? So you've got the pull factor, which is what Paul was talking about. What happened to your dad, unfortunately, Mo, was here's a great deal, sign up now. But they want to create that urgency. You've got 24 hours to get this deal or whatever it may be, right? So they don't want you to think. They want you to make snap decisions. So there was some really good education pieces that have come out over the years that I don't think are widely known, but were fantastic. So the Take 5 campaign was a really good one. Take 5. It could even be interpreted as speak to 5 friends, 5 trusted relatives about it. They will tell you whether they think it's legitimate or not, and they'll give you a different sense of your understanding of whether this is too good to be true or whether it is legitimate. You are a lucky person who's just won the Spanish lottery that you never entered, right? So not trying to make a joke of it, but this is the kind of tactics they use. And unfortunately, they have. So once you fall victim once, you get added to like a sucker list almost. Again, it's a very poor term to use, but that's kind of the nature of it. This person fell for our scam. They might fall for another one, and then your details get sold on and sold on and sold on. And so you end up getting targeted over and over and over again. And there's even instances where they target people they know they've already scammed and taken money from and pretend to be a fraud reimbursement company. We can get your money back. We'll take on your case for you. And then they try and obviously scam more money out of them. We just need a few £100 to pay for the admin fees to get all the paperwork ready for the courts or for the police or whatever it may be. It becomes a very vicious cycle. So yeah, to the answer your question, education, training, companies should be making sure that all their staff and all their customers have the right level of knowledge to identify these scams.
Wow, the breadth of what you kind of get exposed to is what really jumps out to me when you're describing this stuff. It's I wouldn't have even thought that the reimbursement scam was a thing, but that's, goodness me.
Yeah,
is it?
Look, it's
Sorry,
horrible when you. Sorry, Mo. It's
No,
horrible.
no, yeah.
After all the years that me and Paul worked on it, you become a bit desensitized to it, almost, because you see it all the time, and that's probably not the best approach, because there are real people at the end of that scam or stuff, but you do have to take a kind of matter of fact approach, because you've got to put in the control to protect those people. So yeah.
Is there something about Griffin's business model? So, because we support lots of different fintechs and lots of different kind of financial institutions, is there something about that which makes it particularly difficult to kind of try and prevent kind of financial crime? Like, in your roles, are you having to look at lots of different scenarios and different kind of end customer types and things, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a negatives and there's positives to this, right? So you're absolutely right. I wouldn't call them negatives, maybe pain points or more difficult scenarios, but you're working with a whole breadth of different industries, different types of institutions that have very different customer bases with very different products. So you have to become adaptable. You have to become elastic. You have to be able to pull and stretch yourself into different places and put in different rules and different scenarios, and basically wear about 20 different caps as well, right? Because the type of fraud that happens on a savings account for a retail consumer is very different that might happen on a property transaction, obviously, right? Because you're talking different types of customer, different types of transaction values, different types of MOs. But the positive is we get to see a lot. So we have lots of customers in lots of industries, and we have pockets of customers in the same industry. So we get to see a lot more data than that one institution will get. So we're able to spot trends and patterns a lot quicker and able to react a lot quicker than you would be if you didn't have the whole breadth of information.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because I guess maybe one trend might start in one sector and then spread to another, but because we've got that visibility, you can kind of, as you say, spot it there and then put different controls in place kind of generally and stop it. That's really interesting. What do you think is a very big misconception or a common misconception about, when people mention money laundering or kind of financial crime prevention? What's a big misconception that you've kind of come across in your career?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when you watch programs on TV, right, that's where most of us get our information about general fraud anyway, right? It's not like an everyday walk of life type thing, like Panorama or Dispatches program or the news. It's always organised crime groups, right? And invariably they will say they're linked to West Africa or Southeast Asia or something like that. All right, and the interesting thing about all of that is these are 9 to 5 jobs. All right, these are call centers that are run like companies. So these people will work 9 to 5. They will have targets. They will have team leaders. They'll have scripts. They'll have training they have to comply with, and it's a business to them, right? And a lot of people just think it's just random criminals doing this, but they're not. They're very organized. Like I said, they treat it like a business, as if it was any other call center in for a legitimate company. So that's always fascinating. But the other thing is it's not always these massive organised crime groups. There's a psychology to it as well, that an individual, that a large percentage of fraud or financial crime is committed by an individual on their own. And it's because they go, well, it's only a little lie. If I lie that I've never had a default on my credit file to get this credit card, right? It doesn't really matter. Or, it's a big organisation. They won't notice £1,000 going missing and all that kind of stuff. It's the psychology, and that kind of can snowball. And they're actually the harder ones to identify than these organised groups, right? Because they create patterns and trends. When a random individual who's just, no one will notice, it's a lot more difficult. So I think that's the common misconception, that it's always organised crime that's involved in fraud, when actually there's a large percentage which is just chances, people who don't see it as fraud, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's not always perpetrated overseas. There is clearly an element of it. I received, funnily enough, a company that I was working for previously, and I was in the financial crime area at that point, and I received a call purporting to be that bank, and I know that their call center is in the northwest, and I had a strong Midlands accent come across, talking about my account, and they'd spoke in a way that the company wouldn't address me as a customer, and that can throw you, because you might have a misconception sometimes is that it's going to come from a particular jurisdictions, or what you're going to be looking out for. And actually, this one caught me by surprise. I know that there's a lot of larger banks that have call centers around the Midlands area. Maybe that's why they've used that, because they can probably hook a lot more customers thinking it is actually their bank. But yeah, that was not everything is going to be from derived from overseas.
It's crazy to think that there are, team leaders target. It's like it's unbelievable.
It's a business to them. They've got to earn their salary to pay their mortgages, just like anyone else has. It's just unfortunate that they've gone down that route. I think as well, another important thing, just on misconceptions, Mo, and it's probably what you said about your dad as well, is that people think it will never happen to me. I would never fall for that trick. I would never fall for that. That's just not true. These are, especially the organised groups that we're talking about, they are sophisticated, they are trained, they test and revise, until they come up with the perfect, script, scam, phishing kits, whatever it may be, right? So I think that's a misconception as well. When people watch these shows, they go, "Oh, how can you be so silly?" Et cetera, et cetera. It's not the case. These are very sophisticated, very well thought out scams and tricks.
Goodness me, if only they put their energy towards legitimate business.
Exactly right. You think about some of the hackers over the years that have been recruited by some of the biggest organisations, right? Yeah.
Now let's maybe try and explain a little bit. Let's say we spot something suspicious through our platform. Paul, I guess this might start off in your team. What is the kind of high level? We don't need to give away all of our secrets. We don't want to have people social engineering our Fincrime Ops team. But at a very high level, what kind of happens? So from the point at which your team, Paul, spots something suspicious, what is the kind of rough flow of the things that we do to try and, whatever action decide what action we take in the first place?
Yeah, sure. Often it's the first opportunity that we've had to reassess the customer. So how does the activity fit with what they've provided us at the onboarding stage? Is it any different? Are they using it in a different way? Has the activity changed in the short term? That they've been transacting absolutely normally for 9, 12 months, and then all of a sudden there's a big spike. So that's another thing that we'll be looking out for. It also gives you the opportunity to. We don't look at every single customer onboarding. That we have automated systems in that does a lot of that heavy lifting for us, and there's some great tools that we've got in place. So there's an element of biometrics and what have you. So it gives us the opportunity to go back on that case file and just double check, make sure that everything's in place. Was there any potential signs of suspicious activity going on? So there's another opportunity for us there. Then you've got to come to your conclusion at that point, and your conclusion really is what are you doing with that account in the short term, right? Are you comfortable with the activity, or do you need further information? And if you need further information, what are you going to do? Are you going to freeze the account at that point? Are you comfortable from a risk-based approach to allow certain activity to continue? It's that's why we got the frameworks and processes that we have in place. So we have the standards that are set from the second line, and the policies of course, and then we have the procedures that align to those to that framework. So everyone knows what they're doing, and there's no room for ambiguity at that point. So yeah, it's a control process.
Yeah. It sounds very, very rigorous. And I guess it has to be, because it's also dealing with people's money. It's and it's tough calls to make, I guess. Yeah.
We're adapting these controls all the time as well.
Okay.
We get new customers on board, and we're continuously adapting as we go.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've used this word control a lot, and I guess it makes sense why. Yeah, we need to have controls in place and processes. There can sometimes be this belief that controls kind of kill the customer experience. So I don't know, an obvious example might be, the KYC process is too long. I've had to fill in too many forms, and you want my face and my ID and blah blah blah. But what's your take on this kind of, I guess, this constant friction between controls and user experience and kind of customer experience?
It's a popular topic. We have these conversations, don't we, Mo and Kriss? Most definitely, we have these conversations. And Mo, you've got two sides of the risk coin here at the moment. So yeah, apologies. But it really is a balancing. It's a balancing act. You want to collect the data that you need to make that informed decision on the risk. No one wants to collect too much information that's superfluous to our needs, in short. But it has to be the right information that gives us the best decision that we can, with as least friction as we can possibly apply. I know as a consumer, it's part of our lives, right? How many times do you make a payment and then you're sending the transaction, and it comes up with your face put your face in the frame and that type of thing, where you're setting up a new payee? That to me gives me comfort, but maybe that's because I'm from a risk background. Maybe it's about selling it as a positive, right? Compliance can actually be positioned in a way as a positive and as a selling point if done correctly.
Yeah, I think there's a cost to compliance on this as well, right? So we have laws we have to adhere to, and they set out the minimum expectation of a bank in relation to collecting customer data, verifying that data, and using it for the right reasons. There's obviously a large part of you don't collect more than you need, and that's a big part of GDPR and other regulations as well. But as Paul says, it should give you comfort. You're giving personal data, your money to these people to hold and to look after. You want to know the right controls in place to make sure the right person's got access to that money. There's also been a very interesting shift over the last couple of years that has created quite an interesting argument around customer experience, and that's with authorized push payment fraud, or APP fraud, as we call it. And the regulators made changes to and mandated banks to follow certain rules around APP fraud, and this was very much pushing the liability or the accountability into the banks and the financial institutions' laps. So where previously it was up to the bank or the financial institution to decide whether they believe the customer is due a refund after they've been forced into making a fraudulent payment, they mandated that now, unless there's been gross negligence identified, the bank has to pay back the customer. And the gross negligence bar is very, very high, right? And that's split 50-50. Now, why has this made an interesting impact on customer experience? Well, now the banks have got a vested interest in making sure that transaction, they always have done, by the way, but more so now than ever because there's a financial loss involved, making sure that transaction is legitimate and is not at risk of a scam. So what you're now finding is this overzealous or perceived overreach by your bank, because I want to buy, just for example, a caravan. That's what I've always wanted to buy, right down at the coast. I've never made a transaction that big before. I've saved up for 10 years and now I've got the money, say. So you go to purchase your caravan, you go to pay the deposit, say 10, 12 grand. And the bank goes, hang on a minute, Chris, you've never made a transaction like this. This is unusual. We're going to give you a call. And they give you a call. And you go, no, I'm buying a caravan. It's fine. I'm not so sure, Mr. Collison. We're not going to allow you to undertake that transaction because we think you're being scammed. And that's because, one, yes, they're trying to protect you. But two, if they then allow that transaction to take place with the knowledge that they think it's a scam, and it is a scam, they've now got to pay you back. They've lost that money. So there's an interesting argument now, right? So is it overreached by the banks? I don't think it is. I think they're protecting their interests. Therefore, is there a potential that the regulation is making consumers lose their accountability for their own actions, and therefore the bank is now having to take steps to remove that accountability from you, really? So yeah. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah, that was a large part of the consultation, wasn't it, with APP and the liability shift? Does it detract from the consumers' like responsibility really for their own actions? And if you know you're going to get your money back, it makes that decision of, well, I'll take a chance.
Wow. I'm just trying to, I mean, it's funny because as you like describe that caravan situation or like that scenario, Chris, my mind goes back to some of like my own experiences where maybe I've had a call or like a message or something from my bank, and I'm like, so okay, this is what's going on behind the scenes when they're thinking something suspicious is happening, or I guess for people who aren't in, even for me, like who I am in this industry, but for people who aren't in this industry, they probably don't know what APP means. Like, what is it?
I think that's a major issue, because the first thing you do, I'm going on social media to complain that my bank wouldn't let me buy something that I want to buy with my own money, right? Because it is a complaint. It's my money. I earned it. I should be able to spend it however I want.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because of this legislation, there is a financial risk to banks not having those controls in place. So, yeah.
I think it goes back to the point of making people understand the why behind the controls. Yeah, like, why is the legislation designed like this? Why is the bank acting like this?
Just as a caveat as well, there's a lot more reasons why a bank would ring you just for saying a transaction, not just because they're worried about losing their money. There is points within the regulation that says you have to have the right controls in place to identify APP fraud and warn your customers of it. So it's not just, oh no, we're losing money, that's all we care about. There is a lot more to it. I just wanted to throw that caveat in there before I get complaints.
All good. We can't have a podcast episode without talking about AI, because it is the topic of the century by the looks of it. How does AI interact with financial crime?
From a first line perspective, so you can put it how criminals use it, how Fincrime specialists use it. Criminals are using the technology to help impersonate to a certain degree. I've seen instances of previous company that I worked for, and the CEO was impersonated to make a payment, which was really quite the deep fakes, I guess. So that's one area that the criminals are using it for sure. It makes our life a lot harder, of course. On the fin crime prevention side, I think there's always been the hesitancy to a certain degree because you've got to try and explain how you're using it. If you're using it in a prevention method, you've got to explain that you know how it's working. So I guess there's always been that hesitancy because if you're put in front of the regulator, well, good luck. Go on and explain how that AI model is working. I think we're getting better at it as an industry, 100%, and I think the regulators are they're a lot more sympathetic and understanding of its uses, 100%. But from my experience, it's often used. I think the term of it is embedded AI. So we would put it in the likes of CRM systems almost as like a co-pilot. So all the repetitive stuff that you do, all the tasks that you do over and over again, it can pick those up and say, do you want to do this with it? Yes, click, thank you very much, done. The case is complete. So I think as a industry, we're using it in that controlled method. We're giving it the boundaries in which it can perform in, because you don't want it, moving over to the wide web and bringing in information that isn't relevant or conflicts with what you've already got. But yeah, I think from an industry perspective, at the moment at least, we're using it more in that kind of contained, embedded solution from experience.
Yeah, I think Paul's right. It's about efficiency, right? Anyone who's been an analyst in financial crime at the start of their careers will know you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find that one prince, right? That's an interesting investigation that you're going to want to do. So I think it's definitely around efficiency at the moment, because of the explainability of models. If you want it to start making risk-based decisions, that becomes a more difficult sell to the regulator. And obviously the regulator is very keen that people are using it in the right way. I think, there's been primitive AI in some guys in financial crime prevention for many years. So we'll call it machine learning, right? So you create your baseline normality. This is what a normal customer looks like. The system starts calculating that, right? And anything that spikes outside of normality will create an alert. So there has been, like I said, a primitive versions of AI with the system learning your customer activity and so on. So yeah, but I would love to see how it develops, how it can be used to identify more effectively, because like I say, you have to go through so much rubbish, so to speak, with certain systems to find the real juicy stuff, that if AI can be used to improve that, then it's a massive win, because you're able to then deploy your resources on the things they need to be doing, not just doing admin work, right? And that's massively important as well, because if it takes you days and days and days to get through a pile of work, when actually the AI can help you find that case that needs to be looked at today right away, then fantastic.
It's fascinating as well how you framed it, Paul, to start with, where it's how I guess criminals are going to use it and how we're using it. And again, goes back to the point you made, Kriss, earlier about the arms race, and it's constant kind of yeah.
The interesting thing about that, Mo, is there's no regulator telling the criminals how they should be using it and how they should explain how they should, right? So they've already got a head start on us because they can test it and play with it and have great fun. We've got someone to sit in front of and go, yeah, sorry, this is how we're using it. So yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes we are a little bit, one arm tied behind our backs, trying to keep up. But it's going to be an interesting time as AI evolves.
Yeah. Goodness me. I'm really worried about the deep fake thing. I'm really, really worried about that because I guess it's just so easy nowadays to impersonate, well, for AI to impersonate a voice. And then talking about my parents again, like they're the generation who trusts phone calls and yeah, goodness me. Let's not go there. That's worrying. Yeah, but Kriss, Paul, we could talk for a lot longer, and I think what you both do is, for me, really, really fascinating. And like I was saying earlier, like incredible responsibility, and you both keep like such a calm, like practical vibe, which is very, very impressive. Thank you for sharing like that little window of insight into your world, which is incredibly cool and keeps us all safe.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about it. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thanks, Mo. And if that's how we're portraying ourselves as nice, calm, and collected, then great. You're not on the Kriss and Paul calls.
No. You haven't seen the tears, Mo. The tears.
You didn't need to say it on the public podcast.
Fair enough.
No, I appreciate you both very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.